Hi guys, welcome to my channel Lush Gardener. I hope you guys are fine and are safe. So in today's video we are going to be talking about 10 such things that are very important or are very essential for a beginner who is about to start keeping succulents. Now the first and the most important thing, as you can see my arrangement itself, there has to be a good amount of breathing room. So that there can be a good amount of airflow and air circulation, because this is going to be very important, especially this is going to aid in helping you dry the soil faster. It is going to keep the pests away, because when there is a good amount of airflow, when there is a good amount of breathing space, a lot of these molds and fungus are unable to grow. When you tend to make things very congested, depending upon your environment, the rate of mold or fungus can attack your plants. Apart from that, giving them a good amount of breathing space or spacing them out in between will help you maintain the succulents, meaning that it is going to help you clean the succulents or do a visual check. Otherwise it can be really difficult to check if there are any bugs, or it is going to be a little difficult for you to do the maintenance of pulling out the dry leaves. The second one is the most important, and that is light. Now, as I said this earlier as well, you cannot grow succulents in shade, you cannot grow succulents in low light. Even today, there are people who still assume that succulents can be easily grown indoor. A lot of people tend to make arrangements and place them on their work table or work desk. It is not going to work out. Succulents are not meant to be kept indoor unless you provide them with that exact amount of light or the frequency of light, which is usually provided by a grow light. So if you're planning to grow them indoor, then you have to ensure that you are getting a grow light. Of course, for a lot of people now during winters, it's going to be a big task to keep their succulents out. So you will have to move them indoor, because they cannot be kept out in snow. So you'll have to get them indoor, but before getting them indoor, you have to ensure that you have a grow light. Point number 3, which is again a very important factor in growing succulents, and that is having the right type of soil mix. Now guys, you can use any type of soil mix as long as the soil mix is loose, porous, well draining and lean in organic matter. Do not add a lot of organic stuff into your succulents, they will not do quite well. Do not have a mix that tends to stay moist for a longer period of time. Do not have a mix that has a lot of organic matter. You want to make a very lean nutrient soil, and that is going to work out really well, because this is where a lot of people tend to fail more because of the soil mix. A lot of people tend to make a very heavy soil mix, or they tend to make a soil mix that is highly organic, or they tend to make a soil mix that tends to retain a lot of moisture. Peat moss is something that you shouldn't never use. Vermiculite is something that you should never use, because these are the materials that tend to absorb excess amount of moisture and they store it in the soil. They tend to retain in the soil, and that is going to definitely harm your succulent. Again, it all depends upon your environment, so this is something that you also have to experiment. Point number 4 is watering. Now guys, we all know that succulents prefer less water. Now always remember, low water does not mean no water. Now water has nothing to do with succulents. A lot of people are worried that when they tend to water their succulent starts to die. The whole reason behind this is, I have spoken about this multiple times. The whole reason behind this is, if your soil tends to stay moist for a longer period of time, that is what tends to overwater your succulents, and it is not related directly with your watering. For example, let's say a person tends to water his or her succulents every 3 days, and there is another person who tends to water his or her succulents every 2 weeks. Now there can be a possibility the person who tends to water his succulents every 3 days might have a healthy succulent, but whereas a person who tends to water his or her succulent every 2 weeks might happen to have an overwatered succulent. And this is where a lot of confusion arises, and this is what I have seen a lot of people talk about. Whenever you ask them or whenever you point out that your succulent is being overwatered, the immediate next answer is, but I watered it 1 week ago, I probably watered it 15 days ago or 2 weeks ago, but still my succulent is being overwatered. So it is nothing to do with your watering, but it is the amount of time the soil has taken to dry. Probably the person who waters his succulent every 3 days has a very good type of soil mix. But on the other hand, you have a very different type of soil mix. So even after watering it after a gap of 2 weeks, your succulent still got rotted because probably the soil had not dried even for a week. The soil had not even dried for 2 weeks. Probably on the second week, the soil was slowly starting to get dried, and you went ahead and watered it once again, and that's how it might have got overwatered, or it might have died. So it all depends upon your soil mix. Definitely, if your soil mix is going to stay moist for almost 2 weeks or almost a week, definitely the succulent is going to have signs of overwatering, and it will most likely get overwatered and get rotted. Another thing is related with pots. Always ensure that you go with shallow pots. As you can see, my pots are very shallow. Probably they might be only 2 inches in depth, that's all. Because these are slightly larger ones. Now if you have pots with a width like this, it tends to work out really well, because the soil will also tend to dry faster. Plus we have a lot of succulents in this. If you're going to only keep one succulent in this, of course the succulent is going to get rotted, because the soil is going to take a very long time to dry, and that one particular succulent is going to have all the pressure to absorb that water. And remember, succulents do not have a mind of their own. They will continue to drink until they get drowned and die. So they do not have their own mind. So it's not that if you are going to water and if they feel that they are full, they're going to stop drinking. No, they will continue to absorb that water as long as there is moisture in the soil. So you have to be extremely careful. So always go for a very shallow pot. The width is not an issue. You can go for a wider pots as well, but ensure that you put more succulents so that there is a good distribution of water. Apart from that, I always tend to go with pots that are porous in nature. Mostly I make papercrete pots or earthen pots or concrete pots. So all of these pots are very porous in nature. They are very breathable. They tend to suck out, or they tend to absorb excess moisture from the soil. So if you are a beginner, you can definitely opt for these pots. Of course, the plastic pots or ceramic pots also tend to work out really well. But if you want to go with a foolproof plan, then your earthen pots are going to be your best friend. So you can go with earthen pots. Point number 6 is try to have a drain hole in your pot, especially if you are a beginner. A lot of people tend to grow their succulents in pots that do not have a drain hole, but that requires a little bit of skill, especially when you're watering it, because you should know exactly when the soil is completely bone dry and how much of water you want to add. Because of course, if you're going to add too much of water, the water will not be able to pass because there is no drain hole, and the water is going to pool in the pot. So there are people who tend to grow succulents in drainless pots, but if you're going to take my advice, and if you are just starting off with succulents, go for a pot that has a drain hole. A small little drain hole is absolutely okay. It doesn't need to be like a large one. Even a very tiny little drain hole is absolutely okay, so that it can push out all the water. So this is something that if you are a beginner, start with this. Don't immediately go with a pot does not have a drain hole, because it's going to make growing succulents a little difficult for you initially, but then over the period of time, if you have experience, it completely depends upon you. But if you're going to take my advice, the best thing what you can do is use a pot with drain hole. It's going to make your life easy. Point number 7 is to buy a succulent that is suitable in your environment. Now, it's not necessary that all the succulents are going to match in your environment. For example, if you're going to take my case, I do not grow sempervivums. No matter how many times I'm going to buy sempervivums, they are not going to work. It's nothing related with my care, but it's because of the environment. So I avoid sempervivums because they are not suitable for my environment. In the same way, there could be certain succulents that might not match to your environment, or for people who are from coastal areas, you have to be extremely careful, because you have to be very picky when it comes to selecting succulents, because a lot of hybrids are not going to do quite well in your environment, because your environment is very humid, there is a lot of heat, so a lot of succulents are not going to do quite well. Point number 8 is again related with climate. If you are from a place wherein you experience snowfall and frost, do not keep your succulents outdoor. Or if you are from a place wherein the summers are very extreme, and you are in a particular place or a location where you experience heat waves, so you cannot afford to keep your succulents outdoor, because your succulents will get damaged either during winters by frost or during summers by heat waves. Both the frost and heat waves can destroy your succulents. In fact, frost can completely rot your succulents. It might look a little plump and healthy, but if they have been in a frost, after a couple of days, they will start to rot. Talking about heat wave, it will completely kind of burn your succulents. They are going to start looking really ugly, and there are going to be a lot of burn marks, and eventually that succulent will also die. So you have to be extremely careful whenever you are growing succulents. This is what I tend to do. I always keep checking the forecast, how the weather is. So this is one extra step you need to take when you are growing succulents, especially if you are from a very extreme environment wherein you know that but in this particular season there is going to be something that's going to come up. So always be ready. For people who are from very extreme environments, I would say always keep a good quality of grow light handy, because in case if your plan A fails, you can always go for plan B, and that is growing your succulents indoor under a good quality of grow light. Point number 9 is always propagate your succulents. Once you tend to see that the pups have reached a decent size, always try and propagate them. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is, God forbid something goes wrong with the mother plant and the mother plant tends to rot or have issues, you always have another backup, and that is the small offset or the pup. You can even go for leaf propagations. You can even go with the separating of the offsets or doing stem cutting. All of these methods will work out in order to continue with your collection. Point number 10, and this is the most important, and this is where a lot of people tend to go wrong. Now, that is called as adding of nutrients or fertilizers to your succulents. Now, guys, never ever be in a hurry to add fertilizers. A lot of people have a misconception that if you are going to make the soil organic, the succulent is going to grow healthy, the succulent is going to grow fast. This is completely incorrect. This is just a myth. In fact, if you're going to do this, your succulent might get further damaged. Remember, succulents tend to store water in their leaves. They also tend to store some nutrients in the leaves, and they do not need a lot of it. Apart from that, succulents, depending upon the variety, tend to go dormant in different seasons. Probably one variety will go dormant during summers and one variety will go dormant during winters. So there is a reason why succulents tend to grow slow, and it is not related with inadequate supply of fertilizers. Always remember, most of these succulents come from arid conditions, or they come from a location or an environment or a native wherein they don't get a lot of these fertilizers or nutrients. So you have to refrain from adding so much of fertilizers in the soil. You might have seen my succulents. I already have a soil mix that is not very organic. Apart from that, I don't even add any additional nutrients to the soil, and you can already see how my collection tends to do. So a lot of people I have seen, they already have a quite organic mattered soil, like they already have leaf compost in the soil, they have vermicompost that they have added, and to top it all, they want to know what are the other fertilizers that they can add. If you're going to add too much of fertilizers in your soil, your succulent will definitely start having the negative effects. It will start to have issues. Apart from that, because of the excess amount of organic matter, you are going to have mushrooms in the soil. You are going to have a lot of fungi, fungus, mold. Everything is going to start growing in the soil apart from your succulent. Your succulent is going to start to have very negative effects, and to a point wherein the succulent will start to melt because of excess nutrients in the soil. So be very careful. If you are a beginner, follow all of these 10 points, and trust me, it is going to help you. It is going to make you grow succulents healthy if you are going to follow all of these methods, because this is something what I have been following. This is something what I have learned. I did not have any information at that point of time when I started growing succulents like today how we have. So I basically had to learn the hard way. I had a lot of trial and error. I lost a lot of succulents, but there was one thing that I always did, and that was not make the same mistake. Let's say, for example, if my soil mix was getting compact, the next time what I did is I filtered the garden soil. So when I filtered the garden soil, I no longer had the compact soil. So in the same way, I tried to improvise on what I used to do, and every time I made a mistake, I noted it down and I did not do the same mistake again. And with this, I was able to grow my collection. With this, growing succulents became much easy. So guys, I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep propagating.